Hi everyone, welcome to the brand new session on ethics, governance and sustainability from virtual law. Without any waste of time, let us start off with lesson 1 of the paper. Firstly, let us look into the scope of this particular lesson, number 1, which deals with the introduction to ethics, corporate governance and sustainability. This lesson covers the concepts of ethics and particularly business ethics, its scope and advantages, and theories of ethics. Let us go through it one by one. Firstly, the concept of ethics. The term ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos. There are multiple definitions for it, but most popular of all is the meaning of ethics as per the Oxford Dictionary, which is the moral principle that governs a person's behavior or how an activity is conducted. To summarize, ethics is a conception of right or wrong conduct. It deals with fundamental human relationships, social values, moral choices which one person makes, and it also talks about the fair and equitable treatment to all. By this, we particularly mean that in the eyes of ethics, the act is important and it is not the person who has committed such act. The person who has committed such act is immaterial, and hence everyone is equal when an act is conducted, be it an ethical act or an unethical act. Finally, an ethical act need not necessarily be legal, and an unethical act need not be illegal all the time. So that, to simplify, we call it as ethics and legality of action need not coincide. For example, if we do not help a person who has met with an accident, yes, definitely it is unethical, but it is not illegal, right? So legality is something which deals with the legislation, but ethical or not, it is dealt with through certain theory. You will understand that in the subsequent slides. Now let us focus on one of the sciences of ethics. So we usually have applied physics, applied chemistry, applied mathematics, right? So similarly, we have the concept called applied ethics. One such applied ethics is what is your business ethics. It is a branch of applied ethics. It is an application of general ethical ideas to one's business. To know how an organization is applying ethics to its business, we need to look into the following 3 levels of that particular organization. Number 1, the individual level, and the most important level. So we all have read in the Companies Act that the company is different and the persons who are running that particular company are different, right? Which means it is basically those individuals who are running a company who will constitute what a company is. So if you say that Tata company has such a brand image, or if you say that Reliance is so reliable in terms of the products it comes out with, or if you say that the food products of Britannia are something which we can suggest for people to have, it actually means the people who are working for that organizations are so well equipped with such kind of traits or professionalism that they come up with such better products for customers to consume, right? So it's always at the individual level that we need to first apply the concept of ethics, right? The reason for that is, now, the individuals are the basic and the core component of any organization or of any business. So it is basically the idea of one individual which would usually be conceptualized in the way of a business, and hence the ethical activities of such individual is always important, and it will always determine the level of business ethics of such organization, right? The second level is the organizational level. So after the individual level, even the organization should have a set of principles, standards, or certain code of conduct upon which the individuals will act. So basically, the individuals have their own set of ethical activities. Over and above that, the organization should also guide them as and when they face some kind of a difficulty in the activities they do as part of their jobs, right? So organization level, we have several things to look into, like work culture or cultures in respect of the traditions or the customs which the company usually promotes or some kind of religious practices which the company may adopt. So all these things play a crucial role in terms of the ethical values which a company maintains at its organizational level. And finally, the society level. This is something which every organization should concentrate on. So beyond the organization level, the company should, or the company, or basically any kind of a business, need not necessarily be in the form of a company. Any business should start communicating with the society, should start thinking that its activities have some kind of an impact on the society. So that is what is the society level about, right? But just to summarize business ethics, one should always remember that the ethical activities of the people working in such organization is a major constituent of business ethics, and that decides what a company or what the particular business is about in terms of its ethical activities, right? So conceptually, business ethics is always in the form of code of conduct which prescribes in detail what are the do's and what are the don'ts and such decision making mechanisms of a respective business, right? So this is about the ethical or business ethics. Now, let us look into the scope of business ethics in various functionalities of a company. And not just that, we will also identify what kind of benefits the business ethics has for an organization. Firstly, the scope of business ethics in compliance. So, as a company secretary, we are the persons who are responsible for compliance of various laws, rules, regulations, and such other policies, procedures which a company usually adopts for. So, if you think compliance is a burden, if you think compliance is something which has been done, which a company usually does only because it has to do as per law, then it's totally wrong. Because that is not what is something which is expected out of a department which runs for compliance, right? So applying ethics in a compliance department, it ensures that the people who are responsible for the compliance take it more as their responsibility or more as a ethical activity which they will pursue rather than as an obligation or rather than as a fear that such non-compliance would amount to some kind of a penalty or some kind of a punishment, right? So compliance should never be a result of fear. It should always be an option which a company takes whenever you pose them two choices, whether you comply or not. The company should not even look at the choice of not complying a particular provision. So where law says do it, the company should always, company or for that matter any other business, should always be ready to do it. So that is what is ethics in compliance team. Similarly, ethics in finance. So finance is one area where there is more risk of financial scams which might take place in a particular company. For example, if you have the Satyam scam because of some kind of a financial misrepresentation of the figures in its audited accounts, right? So ethical activities or ethics, applying ethics in finance is very critical or crucial for any business. Ethics in human resources also has a huge scope in terms of the people who are working for the company. So their ethical activities ensure that the number of cases registered against co-workers will reduce, the number of sexual harassment cases registered in an organization will reduce, and the way the people who stay in a company, the way they look at the company is always improved depending upon the kind of ethical activities the organization usually takes into its purview. So, and in the human resource department, which is very crucial or which is like a fund or foundation for a company, ethical activities shall be imbibed in the code of conduct of such particular department. After that, we have the ethics in the marketing department. So marketing is a tool upon which a company will sell its products or its services. So through that particular process, it is actually exposing itself to the society, saying that this is what this particular company is, or this is what the product or the service of this particular company or of this particular business is, right? And when you're marketing such kind of a product or a service or your business per se, then you should be very cautious to know that whatever you say, whatever you represent to the society or to the community or to the customer about your product, business, or your service should actually be in reality the same. So you cannot say something which that product does not possess, nor can you say something which the product does not provide for or the service does not provide for, right? Hence, trying to mislead customers or trying to mislead them to make sure they buy your product or they procure your particular service, it is something which is unethical, right? So your marketing strategies should also adopt for ethical standards. And finally, in the production department. So production department is one such department or a functionality of a company which is directly linked with this customer satisfaction. So your customer satisfaction is somewhere down the line linked to the production team. So how is it linked? Because the production department is the one who shall take care of the quality, the timing, the quantity, and the reliability of your particular product. The more stringent the policies they have in place, the more proper the product would always come out, right? And hence, adopting ethical practices in production department is vital for any organization in order to satisfy its customers. So this is what is the scope of business ethics in various functionalities of a company, and having applying such business ethics to any business, we have certain advantages, which are: number one, attracting and retaining talent, that is the employees of the company. Number two, increasing the loyalty of your own investors. And number three, satisfying your customers and ensuring that new customers add on because of the kind of satisfaction they have in terms of your product or your service. And finally, the regulators feel comfortable in order to look into your business, in order to have, they feel good that this particular company is actually adopting proper ethical practices in its business, and hence their watch on your company is gradually reduced. So this is what is the concept of business ethics, including its scope and advantages. Now, let us go through theories of ethics. There are various theories of ethics, starting from deontological theories, teleological theories, utilitarian approach, virtue theory, justice theory, theory of egoism, and finally theory of relativism. Let us quickly brief through each theory in our subsequent slides. Firstly, deontological theory. The word deon means duty, and it is also a Greek word. It's derived from a Greek word, right? So what is the particular concept of deon or a duty? So duty is something which is seen in your actions, in your acts, right? So as far as the deontological theory is concerned, the act or the action is always important than the consequence. So it means where an act has been committed, then whether such act is ethical or not is decided on the acts itself, based on the act itself. It is not decided based on the consequence of that particular act. And hence, for a good consequence, if the means is something, or if your act is something which is not with respect to the duty you are supposed to do, then such kind of an act is not ethical, even if your consequence is good, right? For example, let us say Mr. A is a government employee, and he came across some kind of an advertisement in a TV or a newspaper about a small child who is getting operated, and he got to know that she requires 10 lakhs in cash for the sake of operation. So in order to save the child, Mr. A decided that he will take bribe from so and so contractor, and ask for bribe of some 10 to 15 lakhs and send the entire money to the parents of the child to save the child, right? Finally the consequence is the operation was successful, the child is good, she's all happy. But the problem here is, as far as the deontological theory is concerned, the action of Mr. A by taking bribe and sending that bribe to save the life of a small child is unethical, because as per deontological theory, the act is more important than the consequence. Here the act of taking bribe is something which is unethical. So this, I hope, is it will help you understand the concept of deontological theory of ethics. So as per this particular theory, one person is expected to do moral acts not because it gives good consequences, but because the act is moral in itself, or the act is good in itself. So one gentleman who had always supported this concept of deontological theory is Immanuel Kant, and the Kantianism is something which is a popular mode of deontological theory. Mr. Kant always argues that to act in a morally right way, people must act from the duty. So their duty is something which shall be reflected in their acts, and it is always argued by Mr. Kant that it is not the consequences which make an act right or wrong, but it is always the motive of the person who is carrying out such action which decides whether such act is right or wrong. So here we are talking about not the ethical aspect but the concept of right or wrong. So an act can be right or wrong not based on the consequence, not based on the act, but based on the person, based on the motive of the person who is actually carrying out such particular action. So this is the concept of Kantianism, and you can always quote the Immanuel Kant's theory, or you can just simplify it as saying Kantianism as one applied concept of deontological theory. As per the deontological theory, Mr. Kant has identified two imperatives, one hypothetical imperative and number two categorical imperative. As far as the hypothetical imperative is concerned, it is always conditioned by an and. For example, if you look at the screen, so I ought to study hard if I want to pass my exams, right? So over here the and is we're wanting to pass the exam, but the act is studying hard. So studying hard, yes, it is ethical or it is something which is right. So here as far as Immanuel Kant is concerned, he talks about right or wrong. So studying hard is right, but why is it that he's studying hard? Because he wants a consequence, that is an and, to pass his exams. So hypothetical imperative is one where you cannot avoid doing an act because you know the end of it is something which you want to achieve, right? So that is what is an hypothetical imperative. As per the categorical imperative, it is completely opposite to an hypothetical imperative, since it is not conditioned by any of the conditions. It is unconditional and it must be obeyed under any circumstance. So that is what is a categorical imperative, and this is the concept of deontological theory and Kantianism. Now let us discuss what is a teleological theory. So teleological theory is, again, the word tele is something which is very important in teleological theory. Tele is a Greek word which means end or purpose. So as per this particular theory, this is something which is totally against or totally opposite to that of the deontological theory. So as per this theory, the consequences actually determine whether the act is good or bad, is ethical or unethical. Right? Let us take the same example of Mr. A, who has taken bribe to save the life of a small child. So in this, applying the teleological theory, or applying the school of teleological theory, that particular act of Mr. B is, or I'm sorry, that particular act of Mr. A is ethical in nature, right? So the reason of it is the consequence, that is the life of the child being saved, is very important, right? It's most important, and the mode or the means by which you are able to achieve it is something which is immaterial under the teleological theory, and that is the reason why it is also referred to as consequential ethics, and it always leads to the consideration of full range of stakeholders before any business decision is taken into picture, right? So this is the concept of teleological theory. So deontological theory and teleological theory are closely linked together. The example should always help you understand the difference between the two, right? So now let us look into the concept of utilitarian approach. So what is an utilitarian approach? So this is the proper business approach of most of the businesses existing in today's world, right? So as per the utilitarian approach, it always focuses on behavior and the results, but not on the means of such actions. So it is not just the result, nor is it just the behavior. It is both the behavior of a particular business or a product or a service, as well as that particular result which has been obtained out of it, which is very important. But the means how you have achieved it is something which is immaterial under the utilitarian approach. So usually the concept of profit and all comes under the utilitarian approach, and the cost benefit analysis which we have studied under the costing is something which is the most popular tool under utilitarian approach, right? So as per this particular approach, an action is always ethical only if the sum of utilities produced by that particular act is always greater than the sum of utilities produced by any other act, right? So this particular comparative comparison helps us understand whether the act of the particular business is ethical or not. And this approach gives more significance to good over right. So this in crux is what is an utilitarian approach, going forward to good over right. So if you're having good profits, but even if the mode of that achieving is not right, it's okay, because as far as utilitarian approach is concerned, it considers good over right. right? So this is what is the concept of utilitarian approach. So now let us briefly go through the other kinds of the other theory of ethics include virtue theory, justice theory, theory of egoism, and theory of relativism. Firstly, the virtue theory. Under virtue theory, the word virtue is something which is important. Virtue means character, and the character or traits of an individual is what is considered under a virtue theory. So, applying the virtue theory, we can decide an act whether it is ethical or not depending upon the individual or the characters or traits of that particular individual. So that is what is a virtue theory, which concentrates on the individual and the ways to improve the quality of life of an individual, right? And then the justice theory. So justice theory does not depend on the act nor on the consequence. It just depends on the principle of equality. So it decides whether an act is ethical or not by applying the principle of equality. Next, the theory of egoism. So this theory of egoism surrounds around the single letter I. So where an act is giving more benefits to me, I consider it ethical. If not, I consider it unethical. So theory of egoism always rotates around that particular individual, maybe an individual company or maybe an individual or a body corporate or whatever it is. But what kind of benefits do I reap out of my particular act decides whether the act is ethical or not. And finally, the theory of relativism. So applying the theory of relativism, we mean that ethics can never be an absolute truth, which means ethics in one society or one religion or one state or one nation need not necessarily be ethics or ethical activities in another state or other country or other religion or other community, right? So the concept of ethics varies from state to state, religion to religion, country to country, or from one community to another community, from religion to religion, right? And hence, by applying the theory of relativism, we imply that ethical activities can never be crystallized. So depending upon the state, depending upon the place, depending upon the situation, we can vary the concept of ethics for that particular reference. So these are the theories of ethics. So by this, we have finished the concept or conceptual understanding of lesson number 1 of ethics, governance and sustainability. Thanks for your time.